time to armor up and level out. Listen up and hear what we're about.
Welcome back to Armor Gym. Josh here with Coach Dusty.
Hey, man.
Owner Dusty. Entrepreneur, all the things.
Whatever hat needs to be
All the
worn,
things.
man.
We brought you out today. Brought you out of hiding today to talk about ego lifting.
Yeah.
Ego lifting specifically.
It's a real thing.
Oh, yeah. Big time. I wanted to talk about it because I want to know how you recommend. So every day, let's set the groundwork for this. Every day you work with roughly, on average, how many athletes?
I would say on an average, about 6 to 7 like individual athletes.
That's a lot.
And then, on not every day, but every other day or so, then I've got some groups too, so can have 10 to 12 people in them.
That's a lot. Okay. Now you work out yourself 5 or 6 days a week.
Yep.
Okay. And you have been doing that for ever.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm in the same boat, and it makes for an interesting situation because I still find myself thinking about things I once could do that can no longer do. I find myself falling into the trap of I have that idea that comes up in my head that if I can't do this, I feel maybe lesser than.
Progressing, yeah.
Yeah, and I know when I talk to about the same, 10 athletes a day or so, I talk to the athletes that I work with that is not only one of the things that usually gets people hurt, ego lifting specifically, but it's also one of the main things that keeps people from progressing. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if we couldn't speak to that in terms of, first off, what have you seen? Have you seen the same thing that I've seen, whereas it leads to injury and it leads to not getting the most out of your workouts? And then secondarily, do you have anything that you set up to keep athletes from falling into those same traps?
Yeah, so I think I definitely agree with what you're saying. Like, it'll stop you in your tracks, probably maybe quicker than anything, other than just not showing up.
Yeah.
But I think when you get stuck in the comparison mindset, and it could even be comparing to your previous self, I think when as you age, that's kind of the camp that you fall into is you're comparing it to what you did at 35 or 25 or whatever the number is, ever how old you are. It's don't get stuck in the past, you know. But then there's also, if you're newer or if you're just younger, that you're constantly trying to outlift maybe the person that you're lifting with, if you have a partner.
Yeah.
Or it could be somebody on social media that you want to be like or comparing yourself to, and they did something and now you are trying to go and be better or prove to yourself that you can do the same thing that they did. I don't think that seeing something and then setting a goal to do it is a bad thing.
Yeah.
If you've got a plan on how you're going to do it.
Yeah.
If it's just one of these things where you only want to do it to prove somebody wrong or there is any type of a pride, that's in the mix. And I think that's where the ego part, you got to kind of self-evaluate on that. Am I doing this for myself, to prove to myself that I can achieve it? Or am I doing this to prove somebody else wrong? And trying to prove somebody else wrong or trying to outdo somebody else, that gets tricky.
So you explain the motivation to your athletes that the reason that you're in the gym needs to be 100% for you, not some social media thing or some weird standard that somebody else has set up.
100%. When you walk through the door at Armor Gym, on the floor it says, remember your why. Yeah. Not remember his why or your buddy's why. It's your why. Like, you came to the gym for you, to make yourself better, to improve your quality of life, to increase your longevity, and so that you can be whatever it is that you want to be.
Is that harder for athletes who are younger, or is that harder for athletes who are older to absorb that?
Well, I think there's a level of maturity, as you age. I hope there is, anyways.
That's the idea.
That you start to move away from thinking that you have something to prove.
Okay.
You know, really the biggest person that you've got to convince is yourself. You know, that's always, you're going to be your own worst enemy. The things that you say in your head are going to be they're going to be far worse than anything anybody else is ever going to say to you.
So then go to that. Is that something that you think is a really good idea? Is just in what we have studies that suggest that the way that you would speak to yourself really plays out in terms of injury, in terms of success, in terms of progress. Is that something that you may have athletes start with? Like start with the conversation that you're having with yourself?
Well, and I think yes, and you have to start in thinking of the things that you are, like we talked about before, that you're grateful for. That what are things that are going the way that you want them to go? You know.
So recognizing.
So what's the
good
progress?
Yeah. Okay.
And
got it.
rather than, it's easy to dwell and get hung up on the things that aren't going the way that you want it to, or this pain that you're dealing with,
That's
or you're going to always, if you look, you're going to find something that's not going the way that you want it to. And then I think that's where, if you're already in that mindset of you're trying to prove something, then that's where it can get out of control on you, you know. And then you start pushing, you're pushing the envelope so hard that now you're not even listening to what's going on inside of you, you know. What's your body telling you? What are the conversations that you're having?
I heard Sam Harris say this the other day. The me that wants to lose 10 pounds isn't the only me. So you're trying to figure out which version of you is actually doing the talking and whether you want to listen to that guy. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
So you may need to start out with, like, what do I really want? Like, go all the way back down, and it sounds really cliche, but go all the way back down to what do I really want to get out of this? And if you can strip everything away, if it truly is lose 10 pounds, then that lose 10 pounds means I'm okay with skipping pizza. I'm okay with skipping ice cream. None of these things are going to get in the way because that truly is what I want. But maybe it's not truly what you want if when that one voice comes up and says, I want to lose 10 pounds, another voice is like, no, I want ice cream. And then you go with that voice. Maybe it really isn't what you want. So maybe what we're saying is
redefine.
Really define what
is it that you want. Yeah, because I think a lot of times ego lifting is even insecurity. You know, it's like you're trying to do it because you're not content with where you are. So
which part of that's fine.
Yeah,
part of that's fine.
You never should arrive. You know.
Yeah. Ooh,
so there's never an arrival, but you also can't be trying to push because of the discontentment of where you currently sit. You know, there's a lot of factors that play into it. So if it's insecurity that's driving you to put more weight on the bar, well, that's when look out.
Yeah.
Because that's when it's going to get
that's when
sloppy
injury
and injury happens.
Yeah.
As I told you when you pitched this topic to me, just last night, my 12-year-old son, who's in summer workouts with football, middle school football, they're doing lifting a few times a week, walks in the bedroom and says, hey, Dad, my back's hurting. And I said, you know, we kind of walked through where it's hurting. And then I said, well, did you deadlift yesterday?
Yes.
He said, yeah. And I said, did you deadlift heavy? And he said, well, yeah. I said, well, how heavy? And so he tells me, you know, 200 pounds. And I said, oh, like that, what the heaviest that you've lifted is what, 150? He said, yeah. I said, well, what possessed you to put 200 pounds on the bar or try to lift 200 pounds? He said, because that's what the other guys did. And that's when I stopped and I said, oh, that's called ego lifting. Because then you're just trying to keep up. You know, well, he did it. He's the same age as me. Or he's the same body weight as me. Or he's the same height as me. Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you say, well, if he can do it, I can do it.
Do we really, when I hear you say that, I'm like, I've totally been there, totally done the same thing, and I probably did it yesterday.
Yeah.
So that's my next question is, do we ever grow out of that, or do we just get really good at justifying that same behavior?
Well, I don't know that you grow out of it, but I think what you should do is try to increase your awareness of it. Is when it comes in, when it presents itself, that you can identify it. And then you're like, you know, is it a scenario where I should push it? I should put the weight on the bar, and is it conducive to like what I'm trying to do, or is this me just trying to, outdo somebody else?
Does this progress me or does this regress?
Am I caught up in an emotion, or is this like really part of the process?
So when I hear that, I hear how helpful that is to have somebody around who can audit those thoughts, behaviors, and actions like yourself. Like Oak got to come to you and be like, Dad X, so okay, cool, you don't have a dad who's a coach, but maybe you have a training partner who cares enough to say the real things. Isn't it something like you need somebody who's going to tell you the truth? You need somebody who's going to be your friend, like something like that. So this is that truth person that's there like, no, that's probably dumb.
Yeah.
You probably shouldn't do that. Like that was probably too big of a jump. And you need to be able to listen to them.
Yeah.
They're not trying to hold you back in the long run. And maybe this is more of a question about delayed gratification. In the long run, this is what's going to be better for your goals.
Well, exactly. I think you have to ask that question. Does this help me in the long run? Does this help me long term? Because if it's just a short term gain, and then there's a high risk that comes along with it. Well, right there's your answer. Like, should you do it or not? I think you probably just figured that out.
So generally, there's a lot of inappropriate things that accumulate that eventually become dysfunction. More or less, it's rare that it's one bad rep, but it could be.
Yeah.
So how do we create the space in between that I can do 150 and I made the choice to do 200? How do we create that space to stop, take inventory, and then make the right choice?
Well, unfortunately, I think some of it probably comes with mistakes. Like, you almost got to experience it to be able to identify it. I think definitely for my son, I don't think that was on his radar. He didn't even know what ego lifting was,
Okay. So now he becomes aware.
Yeah,
That's
so there's an awareness only because he's experienced it. Like, he knows, he probably knew he was like stepping outside of his comfort zone a little bit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, because you're not taking into consideration any of the training background of the other individual. This guy may be in 8th grade, and he's been lifting for 2 more years than you have.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of paint that picture in whatever way that you want to.
Yeah.
So I think there is you do need to experience some level of it to be able to have an awareness, so that when it presents itself, then you can identify it and go, oh. Yeah.
So the more times you've pushed into that,
I've
you
been
start
here
to learn
before.
to look for the signs and the signals that are like, hey man, you're overreaching, that's going to become overtraining, that's going to end up becoming injury.
Well, and I think too, it's like especially if it's like heavy lifting, when you're like technically things are starting to break down.
Yeah.
You feel that, and sometimes you can feel it even before maybe a coach can see it. So nobody's going to know that better than you.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's just having an awareness of like even how it feels. Can you confidently do it? Yeah. Or do you really feel like it's going to run a real high risk?
Yeah. So if that's if the framing of it is being able to, or the way that I can get away from that ego lifting is to become aware of it, but a little bit of that awareness has to do with the experience. What other tactics can we layer in for an athlete to start to come back from that more often, or to prevent those same traps? I'll offer one up, and then maybe you have one that I've used for athletes, and it's taking into account the things that you normally do, and then not doing any of those things. And here's what I mean. So you're the guy that comes into the gym, and you're the guy that loves weightlifting, free weights, so on and so forth. That's usually what I go for. Okay, fine. So you're going to take a week where you're not allowed to do that. You're going to do something that has to do with either cardiovascular work. It's going to be a complete derailment from your normal thing.
Yeah.
Maybe you like to work out 7 days a week for an hour and a half each time. We're going to work out 5 days a week for 30 minutes. Whatever it is, it's going to go vastly different.
Yeah.
And it's just going to prove to yourself that you're still living after the fact. And you get to see that a lot of us, myself included, I think that a missed workout, I still try to battle with this today. I think a missed workout is lost muscle, lost function, lost performance. All of those are incorrect. Most of the time, and I've seen this a million times, it actually goes the other way. Not saying take 3 weeks off. That's not what we're saying.
Yeah.
But I am saying take a week and do something completely different, and then realize that mentally may make you stronger than just pushing into the thing that you always do. So that's one thing that I've used for athletes who really struggle, and you can see that and spot that ego lifting where it's, if I don't hit this metric, if I can't climb a rope, I'm mean to my wife, or whatever it is. It devolves into this, I'm not as good of a person. Mm-hmm. So we switch it and we make them learn something else. And then, of course, we can go back to the thing that they like or towards the goal. Do you have any tactics that are like that you would apply to an athlete?
No, I think that's really good. And I have those conversations a lot. Because I think, we all want metrics, like, because that's how we measure. Are we making progress or not? But sometimes we know how that can go, and there becomes this, like, you can get consumed in the metrics to the point where if certain metrics, if they're not moving at the speed that they were 6 months ago or last year, then, well, this is not working as well as it did at one time. So I'm not progressing at the speed that I once was. So those are tricky too. I don't think you can put all your all the weight of your decisions in one specific area, but that does carry value. Like metrics are important.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
But then I think it's like the mindset part of it, and I would say the biggest one is it's that comparison piece. There's this constant, you're comparing yourself to other people that you see in the gym, on social media, or wherever it is. You have to stop comparing. Be you. Figure out why you do it. Do it for that reason. Don't do it for anybody else. Yeah. Like I train because I do want to live longer and I do want to be able to do things for my kids. And that's all great. But even before I can do that, like I've got to want to do this myself. Like I've got to want this for myself. And that's not me being selfish. I'm not telling you need to be selfish, but I'm saying like you have to want this bad enough yourself. It can't be all externally driven. Like you can't just be doing it because you want to lose 50 pounds. You can't be doing it because your wife's, you want to be more attractive to your spouse, or somebody said, you're overweight, you need to get in shape. Whatever. Those are all things that can be driving. Yeah. Can drive you to this decision, but it's like, you've got to want this for you and nobody else, because all that stuff is going to fade. And there's always going to be, if you're in that comparison mindset, and where like you can't watch lifting videos or you get consumed in it and it starts to mess with your mind, man, you've got to have guardrails up, like protect yourself mentally.
That's a good one. So you're saying that watch what you do outside of the gym or the diet or all the things, and if it's a lot of just constantly pumping in 800-pound deadlifts and you're struggling with 150 pounds, maybe you shouldn't be looking at a whole bunch of 800-pound deadlifts.
Right, because you're going to just feel incompetent.
That's the Instagram highlight reel thing, where everything you see is the best lift ever.
People try to argue that that's not. That's not what, there's a lot, I don't disagree that there's a lot of good stuff that comes off of it, but it's also a lot of fluff.
Well, even at the end of the day, the good thing that could be on there, you might not be able to absorb it.
Because there's so much other.
Right, and you might have something that, like we've talked about, is blocking you from being able to internalize it. Like, it's great that this guy's deadlifting 800 pounds for the first time, but if you take it as a knock against you personally,
that you're weak,
then you need to get off of that platform, not continue to dive into those 25 minutes of doom scrolling and then wonder why you're weak.
Yeah.
What would you say? So you're really, really good at talking to your athletes, just like we're talking right now, at having hard conversations that don't even feel difficult. You're excellent at that. Is that another thing? And what I mean by that is, if somebody struggles with ego lifting, maybe they don't know that they do, but they do know that they haven't been getting the results that they want. So maybe they don't know. Maybe they're completely oblivious to it, like you were talking about Oak. He didn't know what he didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe I'm 40 years old and I really don't know that I'm still motivated by that. Is this a situation where you could hire a coach, but instead of necessarily telling the coach exactly what it is that you think you need or that you want even. You could say more of like a open canvas, like, hey, do an assessment, and then you trust the coach enough to put a program together that he thinks will make you better. Now, again, of course, you guys can define whatever better is, but think about truly having the sort of resolve or being the kind of person that says, I don't really think I'm as good as what I could be, so I'm going to go to somebody like you, nothing really on the table, just tell me what better looks like. You're the coach, you're the professional, you're the expert. Then you do an assessment.
Yeah.
Would that be something that might be able to open up the doors for an athlete?
Well, I think especially if a blind spot that you don't see. You start dialoguing with somebody else and you hear yourself and you're like, oh, yeah, I can see how that's a problem.
Or even if you're saying the right things, but then when you get out on the workout floor and you've given all trust away, and all of a sudden that coach finds out that you have a 500-pound back squat, but you can't lunge 10 reps.
Yeah. I think that's always it's a really good place to start.
Yeah.
Because you're bringing in somebody who there's no baggage. They don't know the past, but they get an opportunity to assess the current situation and then just give you unbiased feedback.
And a coach is always there to make you better.
Well,
Who else do you get to meet in a day where the 100% of the responsibility is just to make you better? Now, you could say that your better is different, right? Like your idea of better is I want to have my 3 main power lifts better.
Yeah.
Okay, and maybe your coach is like, well, man, it'd be really nice if you could touch your toes and walk a mile. Like that, maybe that's a different thing. We're not necessarily discussing that. But what we're talking about is somebody who's going to sit in front of you and be like 100% all in on you if you just have enough awareness, like we talked about in the beginning, to pull back a little bit on the ego.
Well, and I think having a coach, it requires a certain level of humility too. Because you got to humble yourself to be open to just feedback, and some of it may be good and some of it may not be good. And I think that you need to hear that. We need to hear that sometimes, We need to hear where we all have blind spots. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about training today, but we could easily shift that over into our lives. You have blind spots in all the areas that the people who are really close to you, they might not even see, But you get somebody from the outside who gets to just kind of get the full picture. Yeah. And again, doesn't have that any biasness toward any one thing. They can see things that others can't. Yeah. And so I think that's where a coach good coaches come in and they deep dive and they ask the hard questions, and they're also going to be there to have the hard conversations. I just had a client a couple of days ago who came in and was like, she's just super discouraged and just one thing after another about just being unhappy, not about working out, but about life,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it was one of those things that got carried into the gym. And so I just listened, for like the first 15 minutes. And then finally I was like, do you hear yourself? 15 minutes, I'm struggling to really stay with it because I'm wondering even how you came in here today. With all the things that you have going on and all the things that you've told me about that's kind of bad right now, we have got to we have to change that mindset. It was so negative and discouraged that you're never going to find hope or results in a mindset that's broken down like that, And Grant, some of us, you may be going through something that's really, really hard and tragic, but there's somebody out there that's going through something that's would make your problem look minimal, So
that's a lot of trust, though, that somebody's putting in you to be able to speak that into them. They've given you that. That's what I'm talking about. That's that ego that something's happened where you're willing, or something needs to happen where you need to be willing to give that trust to somebody that could say, hey man, it's been 20 minutes. I'm not going to commiserate with you any longer. And
And
if
you know
we're truly
what?
going to get better, you're going to have to stop.
And the thing is like, she looked at me and she was like, "You're right. Like, I've got to stop."
That's another thing about ego. If you wouldn't be able to say that if the ego was front and center.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And so again, that humility to say, you're right. I am like in a really bad mental space.
Yeah.
And I got to change that.
And sometimes the gym is exactly where people go to have that sort of therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily bad as long as you can pull yourself out of that.
It's exactly. I think, and it does. It takes a level of awareness, and it just takes you have to come back to the question of, what are you wanting to get out of it?
Yeah.
And I think if you just want to go through the motions, and to say that you did it and check it off the list, you can definitely do that.
Yeah.
But I think most everybody, it takes effort to get to the gym. It takes effort to come in and do what you do. I personally want to get the maximum benefit out of it,
Yeah.
So you've got to be able to check in with yourself and then just be willing to like have a conversation with somebody or hire a coach if that's what it takes. Or it may be a training partner, that just somebody who can help keep you accountable. And if you're in that like rough head space to where the things are not headed in a good direction, I think that makes you more vulnerable to the ego side of things. Because you feel kind of defeated anyways. So It's like your pride swells up, and that's where you start going, you know what? My life does suck right now, but throw 405 on that bar.
Right. So at the end of the day, do you really want progress, or are you just trying to make an excuse to feel temporarily better?
Yeah, man. And that's a hard question to ask too. But that's a really
But if you're
good
willing to
question.
ask it, then you're humble enough to accept the answer. We might just be able to get past the whole ego lifting and get better.
Absolutely.
Dusty, thank you for your time.
Yeah, man.